I'm Bailey.
And I'm Brooke.
And today we're going to teach you about learning and memory in AP Psychology.
Hey, honey. Welcome home.
Hey, Brooke. How was your day at school?
Awful. So boring and hard. Why do I even have to go?
Oh, honey. Well, actually, in AP Psychology, we're learning about learning. And that's why you have to go to school to learn.
Learning about learning?
Yeah, it's actually pretty interesting. Learning is a relatively permanent change in an organism's behavior due to experience. Classical conditioning is a type of learning in which an organism comes to associate stimuli. The unconditioned response is the unlearned natural response to the unconditioned stimulus, like how dogs drool when they are about to eat food. The unconditioned stimulus is a stimulus that triggers a response. This would be the actual food that makes the dog drool. A conditioned response is the learned response to a previously neutral stimulus. So this would be if the dog heard a bell every time that the food was presented, the sound of a bell would cause the dog to drool. The conditioned stimulus is an originally irrelevant stimulus that after association with an unconditioned stimulus triggers a conditioned response. This would be if the actual bell that causes the dog to drool.
Oh, that's kind of cool. Are there other types of conditioning?
Yeah, there are. So there's classical conditioning, which I just told you about, and then there's operant conditioning. So operant conditioning is a really cool type of learning in which behavior is strengthened if it's followed by a reinforcer, or the behavior is diminished if it's followed by a punisher. Respondent behavior is the behavior that occurs in an automatic response to some stimulus. Operant behavior is behavior that operates on the environment producing consequences. So there's two types of behavior, respondent and operant. The law of effect is Thorndike's principle that behaviors followed by favorable consequences become more likely and behaviors followed by unfavorable consequences become a lot less likely. Shaping is a procedure in which reinforcers guide behavior closer and closer to approximations of the desired behavior. A reinforcer is any event that strengthens the behavior it follows. Positive reinforcements are increasing behaviors by presenting positive stimuli, such as food. Negative reinforcements are increasing behaviors by stopping or reducing negative stimuli, such as shock. Punishment is an event that decreases the behavior it follows. A cognitive map is a mental representation of the layout of one's environment. Intrinsic motivation is the desire to perform a behavior for its own sake. Extrinsic motivation is the desire to perform behavior due to promised rewards, threats, or punishments.
I'm so bad at remembering things for tests at school. Do you know anything about that?
Oh yeah, you're bad at remembering things for tests? Well, memory is the persistence of learning over time through storage and retrieval of information. A flashbulb memory is a very clear memory of an emotionally significant moment or event in your life. Encoding is the processing of information into the memory system. Storage is the retention of encoded memory over time. Retrieval is the process of getting information out of the memory storage. Sensory memory is the immediate recording of sensory information in the memory system. Short-term memory is an activated memory that holds a few items briefly, such as the 7 digits of a phone number while dialing before the information is stored or forgotten. Long-term memory is the relatively permanent and limitless storehouse of the memory system. Automatic processing is the unconscious encoding of information, such as space, time, and frequency. Effortful processing is encoding that requires attention and conscious effort.
That's probably what I need to remember stuff on my test, right?
Yeah, you're right. You should. That is stuff you need to learn how to do to remember on your tests. So there is a technique called rehearsal. This is the conscious repetition of information. That will be really helpful when studying for tests and stuff. Also, the spacing effect can help you. This is the tendency for when you study for a spread out amount of time rather than like cramming all before the night before a big test. It will help you to remember on the actual day of the test.
When I'm studying for a spelling test, I always remember how to spell the first and last words on the list. Why do you think this happens?
Oh, it's funny you mentioned that. We just learned about it. That is called the serial position effect. The definition of it is the tendency to recall best the last and first items on a list. Visual encoding is actually the encoding of images.
Oh, cool. Are there any other types of encoding?
Yeah, there are. Acoustic encoding and semantic encoding. Acoustic encoding is the encoding of sound. Semantic encoding is the encoding of meaning, including the meanings of all the words.
Oh, awesome. Do you know how else to help me study?
Yeah, I do have a few other ways to help you study. So, imagery is mental pictures. They're a very powerful aid to effortful processing. Mnemonics are memory aids, especially those techniques that use vivid imagery and organizational devices. So, you can come up with a song to the tune of a jingle you are familiar with to help you remember topics and definitions. Also, chunking is organizing items into familiar, manageable units. So that could also help you with your studying.
Thanks. I'll try to use those to help me study now. What else did you learn about that in class?
Well, Brooke, I'm so glad you're going to use these memorization techniques to study for your tests. I think they'll really help you. So, iconic memory is a momentary sensory memory of visual stimuli, a photographic or picture image memory lasting no more than a few tenths of a second, which is not very long. Echoic memory is a momentary sensory memory of auditory stimuli. Implicit memory is retention independent of conscious recollection. Explicit memory is memory of facts and experiences that one can consciously know and declare. Amnesia is the loss of memory.
Oh yeah, that happens to me all the time on history tests. I forget everything.
Well, sweetheart, if you use the memory techniques Bailey told you about, I think you'll do a lot better. Don't fret.
Yeah, Mom, you are right. My teachers are going to be so happy when I start acting and when I start acing my test.